Lovell's Loons, Slide 1. Slide 2. This presentation is brought to you by the Keyser Lake Watershed Association and the Greater Lovell Land Trust. Welcome to Lovell's Loons, and my name is Bonny Boatman, and I'll be taking you on our tour. Slide 3. Let's take a moment for shameless self-promotion. Please support the two organizations that have brought this presentation to you, the Greater Lovell Land Trust and Keyser Lake Water Association, which works tirelessly to make our little slice of heaven as nice as it is. So let's begin. Going back, we're going to go back in time. Pretty far back, but not that far. Dino Loon, well, there was something that kind of looked like one, and its Latin name was Hesperornis regalis. And here he or she is. This is an artist's rendition because, of course, we don't really know what this creature looked like. But some fossil remains were discovered in the part of the United States where Kansas now is in 1870. The thinking from analyzing the bones is that this creature lives somewhere in the Cretaceous period, which lasted 123 to 66 million years ago. Here's another view of this creature. It seemed to be sort of flightless, but appeared to have all the accoutrement to be able to swim. It was about 5 feet tall and had teeth. Here is the skeletal remains of this creature that was found in Kansas. Slide 6. The Indians had very much reverence for the loon, and the Indian name, the Maori name for this creature was Waimanu. And Waimanu, here depicted by an artist again. Fossils for this creature were found in New Zealand just in 1980. They date from the Pleistocene era, 66 to 23 million years ago. And DNA results confirm that it is related to both penguins and loons. As you can see, it has the loon feet and the long bill. Clearly resembles the body type of the loon that we know. Here's a few more artists' renditions of Waimanu. So when I first saw a loon, I wondered whether it just wasn't an odd-looking duck, perhaps dressed up in really nice clothes. But, of course, it's not. There are some distinct differences between a loon and a duck. Slide 8. Fly, float, dive, and walk. So they both can fly, they both can float, but only loons can dive, and really only the ducks can walk. Loons aren't such great walkers. You can see that the duck is configured nicely for walking on land, whereas from this picture you can see that the loon is not. The legs are way back at the end of the body, which is ideal for propelling them in water, but not so much for walking on land. Slide 9. So close relatives to loons. People used to think the loon was related to auks, gulls, and puffins. However, DNA analysis has proved that that is not wrong. They belong to birds that are in the fish-eating category. So those birds, penguins, and you can actually sort of, when you think about it, see the resemblance. Tube-nosed birds, such as this albatross depicted here, and frigate birds. And here's an example of a frigate bird. All of these birds dive and exist mostly on fish, and so that's the relationship, and loons fall into this category of birds. Slide 10. There are 5 species of loons. The Arctic loon, the Pacific loon, which looks just exactly like the Arctic loon, except that it's located in the Pacific Ocean instead of the Atlantic. The red-throated loon, which can be found way up north in Scandinavia and Upper Canada. The yellow-billed loon, which is found on in Canada as well, far north. And it looks, you can see, very distinctly like the loon we're familiar with, except for that bright yellow beak. And finally, our loons, the common loon, Gavia immer. And here are some lovely pictures of our loons, which I'm sure you're totally familiar with. 16, Native American reverence. Native Americans revered the loon, and the Inuits actually had 30 different words for the loon, including tulik. Tulik referred to the yellow-billed loon. The Ojibways actually had a clan of the loon, and that clan was given the power of chieftainship, and that it was called the Hmong in Ojibwe. The Pennacook Abenaki tribes, who are the American Indians who still reside, but long time resided in the area here in around Lovell, refers to the loon as Midawizla, and it means spirit bird or magic bird. It was the messenger from the gods and kept an eye on human beings, and then his role was to report back to the gods on all the things that humans were actually doing. And here are some Native American depictions of the loon. Loon art, obviously such a distinctive bird, has called for people to depict it in art, and here's some examples of art, including John J. Audubon's loons here. The adult is on the right, and the gray bird there is either a juvenile or an adult in winter featheration. Slide 18. Lunobelia. Lots of lunobelia out there. My favorite is this beautiful, beautiful pot with loons depicted on it. This is a sculpture, an Ojibwe sculpture of a loon and its baby. And then there is the ice sculptures. This one is from Minnesota. Slide 19, migration. So it was a mystery to me when I first got here. The lake is frozen solid in the wintertime. How in the world does a loon survive with a frozen lake? Well, obviously, they have to migrate somewhere. Where do they go? Was a mystery. When do they leave? Where do they go? And what do they do while they're there in the cold winter months? Here's just before we get going on that, a little humor. Spend the winter shoveling snow below 0 temperatures. I'm a loon, but I'm not crazy. Okay, back to our... So where do they go? Answering that question, if you look at this map on slide 21, you will see that it's got aqua at the top, and the aqua area is the breeding area and where they remain in the summer. And you can see that our area is firmly in that region. The orange around the coast are where they spend their winter months. So they fly from their summer breeding grounds to the coast and basically float in the ocean all year. Slide 22. So let's take a look at the Loon Schedule. Slide 23. In October, they are here still, and they are beginning to molt their summer feathers and then to begin to migrate. They all don't migrate on the same day. Some go a little earlier than others. By November, they have reached their winter home, which is the coast, and they float, just beyond the ebb tide. So they continue to molt into their grayish winter featheration. But they spend November, December in their winter home, January in their winter home, February in their winter home, and in March they begin to molt again and then to make their way home. And they arrive here in April and some as late as May. So when a bird molts, it starts, slide 23 still, it starts in the face and goes from there. As you can see in this picture, the bird is starting to molt right under its chin there. 24. And here's a good picture of a loon in full winter regalia. So they usually stay together in the ocean with a bunch of other birds, floating, preening, diving, eating, and sleeping just out beyond the ebb tide. They don't call during the winter months, so you never hear them, and it'd be easy to miss them. And that's what they do in the winter. 25. So a question, why don't loons get cold feet in the winter if they're in that icy water all winter and they don't have any feathers on their legs and their feet? But they have a system, a circulatory system, which sort of stops at the base of the fluffy body before it's attached to the legs and the feet. And it kind of ties off so that the legs and the body, while they're still under control of the animal, they don't have hot or cold sensations. So they're pretty tough. But you could question, do they just have the wrong boots? spring migration and finally getting back here for their summer home. So at the end of April through May, they begin to start trying their wings, which they haven't flown all winter, remember. So they need to exercise their wings and their muscles. And so they do little short flights in April before they begin their major migration. Some migrations are quite long, and others are fairly short. But before they begin that big trip, they have sort of tried out their flight capabilities and their muscles. By June, they're in their home ground, and they find a mate and look for a nesting site and build a nest or rehab the nest from last year. In July, they're busy parenting. August, they continue to be parenting. And in September, or sometime in September, they leave their chicks and the adults go off by themselves and sort of gather in groups and float and get themselves a little fatter. The reason they leave the chicks is so that the chicks can utilize wherever they are and maximize their ability to catch food without having to compete with the adults. Slide 27. The signs appear for spring migration. They're molting into breeding plumage, as you can see in this picture. They're preening and grooming and making those feathers, which are their key possession, if you will, making sure those feathers are nicely covered in oil and all the little critters are cleaned out of their feathers. They spend a lot of time grooming those feathers and preening. It's an important activity. Flapping and strengthening their wings and taking small practice flights before they're ready to go. Then the question is, slide 28, how do they know that it's time to leave? Because you don't want to get there too early. If the ice is still in, that would be kind of a disaster. There'd be no way they could hunt. So how do they know when to leave? Do they watch a weather report on TV with this fellow? I don't think so. Do they check their loon calendar? Well, perhaps, but those calendars get kind of soggy in the ocean. But it's probably the angle of the sun that tips them off. It's a distinctly different angle, and that might just be what they're waiting for. Slide 29. Oops, nope. Rise in temperature. And here's what ice out looks like on a speeded up version. Slide 30. So do they return to the same lake? That is, we all like to think that the loon that we see out there is quote unquote our loon, but not necessarily. Sometimes they do, but sometimes there's an intruder, and that loon needs to be fought off. Often it's a young male that comes, says, this is a nice habitat, and I'm going to duck down here, and then the pair that's been coming for years arrive, and the two males will basically fight it out, and the winner will stay. How do we know these things? Because all loons look alike. Well, these are little bands, and if the loons have been banded, then scientists can observe this kind of activity and be able to tell that it's a new male loon on the lake rather than the one from last year. Slide 31. So when they return, they do claim their territory, and there's several different ways that they can return and claim their territory. One is the passive way, and the passive way is basically it just fills in for a loon that doesn't arrive, so there's no fighting involved. The second way of claiming a territory is if you find a new territory. If the loon finds a new territory and nobody has discovered it or wants it, that's a founding way of taking. And the third way is the most violent way, that they literally fight the loons that have been on this territory for a while, and they fight it out, and the males take it over. The winner takes it over, gets to stay, and inherits that female. Slide 32. Turf battles can be quite dramatic. A Wisconsin study said that about a third of these kind of battles wind up with one of the birds being killed. So 2/3 are resolved somewhat peacefully. Slide 33. Romance. So we have staked out our territory. Now we need a mate. So once the breeding pair has their territory established, did I say slide 33? Okay. They tend to be the breeding pair will stay in their territory largely, and they are pretty monogamous during the breeding season. They do stay together, and the parents cooperate in raising the chicks and building the nests. So do they mate for a lifetime? Well, they actually try to be attached to the territory, and the territory is the prime attraction, not the particular other loon. Although, as it happens, if the two loons successfully pair and raise some chicks in a territory, both loons will try to make their way back to the same area. But that doesn't always happen because they don't migrate together. So sometimes one shows up and not the other, and sometimes they both show up and then an intruder shows up and there has to be a fight. But it's about the territory, not about the other bird so much. 34. Loons are dysmorphic in color, but males are about 20% larger. Much has been made about the colorful male birds and other species I'm talking about now, and in the role of sexual selection. The thinking, of course, is that the colorful feathers, that the female will go with the male that has the most attractive feathers. That's not actually a debate that's settled, but that's kind of an operating theory. But what happens with non-dimorphic pairs, such as the loons? How does the female pick them? Most of this is unknown, but maybe there's more than us humans can see. Slide 35. It is postulated that loons, as other birds, see with ultraviolet vision, and so they'd be looking at a mate in a way that we really couldn't see. Here, this first picture on the right, you can see is what we would see when looking at this particular bird, whatever it is. But if the bird was looking at it with ultraviolet, it's possible that they would see the bird that's depicted on the left-hand side of this picture. A very different view, as you can notice. And again, this is a similar thing. We don't really know what this might look like. These are all just hypotheses. In this picture, the far left is what a human might see, and then the two examples are potentially what a creature with ultraviolet vision might see. So the next step, slide 36, is nest placement and building. The pair has arrived, it's settled that it's their territory, and now it's time to build or rebuild the nest from the former year. So it's very important that the nest be close to something that can shield it, like the reeds that you see here. And it obviously has to be very close to water or almost on the water, and hidden from predators as well as it can be. The males are thought to be the ones that actually select the nest site. So you can see these two. So presumably, and they're looking around for their nest site. But they're kind of sticking together. And I don't know if you can hear it, but there are little kind of "ma" sounds that they're making to each other, almost like a cluck. And he's looking for a good nest site. We don't know if he finds it, though. So here are some examples of loon nests, and slide 37. The sites vary, as you can see. The key components are privacy and water. But a loon nest is just a bunch of sticks and mud, and it's very flat. Here's a couple of examples of these nests. 38. During the pair bond, they are monogamous for the season while they're mating and incubating the eggs and brooding. Both birds brood, and so this is roughly, this coupling takes place roughly from June to September. 39. Loon eggs are not very spectacular. They're greenish brown with speckles. As you can see here, they're about 3.5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. Usually they lay 2 eggs about 2 days apart. 40. Incubation takes about 30 days. Both parents stay on the nest. They swap off. They both turn the eggs, and they are, because they're non-dimorphic couples tend to share in parenting, and the loon is definitely included in that. If the loon on the nest is waiting, and wants its mate to arrive, they may give out a big call. And so sometimes that's what you're hearing, is a loon saying, come back and give me relief from sitting on this nest. A loon on a nest with its head in this position, slide 41, is a stressed position. Obviously, you would never get close to a loon in this position, but this is a very stressed, signaling big stress. 42. So let's take a look at some hatching. This chick has just hatched out of the first egg. This film clip will show you mom sitting on a nest. And eventually she pops right into the water, and the baby that's just got hatched will follow her right into the water. 44. Brooding the babies. Many birds are brooded right in their nests, but not loons. They leave the nest immediately and go into the water. Once the second egg is hatched, none of those loons will return to the nest for the rest of the summer. They totally raise and feed their chicks in the water. Early on, when the chicks are very young, and if it's cold, they will hop onto mom or dad's back and snuggle in under the feathers, as you can see here in these pictures. Keeping baby warm. Again, brooding takes place out of the nest. It takes a few days before the chick can keep warm on its own. So the parents have two main goals: to keep the baby warm and to keep them fed. And they eat a lot during this period because they grow very, very quickly. 46. Feeding the chicks. Both parents provide food for the baby or babies. When they're at these young stages, they need to be fed several times an hour. They feed usually early and late in the day. But the parents are constantly looking for food to give them. This practice continues in a more limited way long after the young can provide for themselves, but right up until the parents take off to migrate. So all through the summer, the parents continue to feed, and at some point the chicks begin to also contribute to their diet. By the third week of the chick's life, the parents start dropping the food in the water, forcing the chick to put their head underneath the water, and hence, giving them a shove towards being the diving bird that they ultimately wind up to be. The adults have great patience with their chicks. The chicks often drop their food, and the parent will pick it up and continue to offer it to the chick. Again, by eight weeks, the chicks are diving for their own food, but it is supplemented all summer long by the parents. Slide 47. This sad but true, chicks grow up and eventually leave the parents. 48. Teenage loons. Of course, there's no such thing as a teenage loon. But this is a young loon. This picture shows you a young loon in the plumage that they develop when they are ready, by the time they are ready to migrate. And it looks very much like the winter plumage of an adult loon. By the time they reach this stage, they must know how to fly, how to find their own food, how to protect themselves against predators, and how, when, and where to migrate. Some of these things are clearly taught by the parents, but some of them are innate. Slide 49. The parents leave their chicks, now sort of fully grown, by the end of the summer, somewhere in September. And they go off to another part of the lake, leaving all of the bounty of the brooding area to the chicks, so the chicks can fatten themselves up, and they go elsewhere and hang out with other unrelated, seemingly unrelated adult loons. And you've probably seen bunches of them floating around in the summertime at the end, very end of the summer. And this is called rafting. Slide 49. Slide 50, sorry. Slide 50. Why do loons have red eyes? This is a question. And because red goes well with their outfit, it looks attractive to mates, better aquatic vision. Well, my guess is that it's the bottom two. Nobody really knows, but it is common for seabirds that feed by breaking the surface of the water, and loon is included, but so are other birds like the albatross and the penguins. And they all seem to have kind of red oil by their eyes. And that's what you're seeing here, is the red oil that covers their eyes. The thinking is that it improves their underwater vision, this oil, and hence the looking to have red eyes. 51. Eating. This is a big part of the loon's day, obviously. They primarily like to feed on fish. These are fish-eating birds. So when they find a nice fish, like you see here, they will swallow it head first. But they'll also eat crustaceans, insects, reptiles. And in this picture, the last picture, you can see that they have caught, this bird has caught a baby grebe, and which will be swallowed whole. Most of their day is spent with their head in the water, searching for food. 52. Sleeping. Loons sleep during the day and night, and they sleep on water, as you see here, with the bill tucked under their wings. Clearly they find a safe place to do this, but they sleep on and off all the time, and this is the position. 53. Now let's talk feathers. Feathers are the most important possession the loon has, or a very important body part, I guess you could call it. And contour feathers are the feathers that we see that kind of cover the animal's outer body. These feathers, while it's not apparent when you look at one, but on the end of them there are tiny little barbs which kind of sew the feathers together, forming this very, very tightly packed outer garment almost, and keeps them waterproof, which is obviously key to the loon's lifestyle. Here's an example of a contour feather. Underneath the contour feathers are down feathers, and down feathers, as you see in this picture, are what gathers the body heat and keeps it. It's very much like your down jacket. And these feathers are way more delicate than the outer contour feathers. 54. But loons, just like humans, are always primping and preening. The loon spends a great deal of their time taking the oil from a gland that is found at the underneath their back tail, and taking that with their beak, and then applying that oil all over to their feathers, and rendering them waterproof. Bathing. Well, loons are in the water, but some activities actually are helping them keep their wings clean and then airing it out. And this posture that you see in the picture here is an example of that. It might look like this is a loon giving a warning, but actually this is a loon that is bathing and drying out its wings and flapping and making sure that it's as clean and presentable as possible. Diving. Loons are actually capable of diving to 200 feet, which is very impressive. They rarely do that. 90% of their dives, or maybe 97% of their dives, are really just surface dives because that's where you'll find the fish. You don't find fish way, way, way down in the water. So most of their diving is small, shallow dives used to hunt a little bit. They have the ability to go down so far because they have little air sacs that kind of collapse, helping them to descend, and also the legs at the back of their body is very helpful component of propelling them underneath the water. What's with the waggle? The first time I saw this posture, with the leg up in the air there, I thought that the loon had been injured and had broken its leg. It really does look like that. But I have come to understand that actually the leg in the air is a means of just exposing it to the sun and warming it up. And they trade off and do both legs, but it's odd, but that's what it was. That's what it's for, is really just to expose it to the sun when the bird is relaxing. Even chicks do the waggle. 58. Loon speak. Uh, 59. Their secret weapon in order to make these incredible sounds that we all know and love is their Syrinx. It's the organ that the birds use to create their calls and songs. It has very different. We have one too, a Syrinx, in our throat, but it's very different from what the birds have. Slide 60. As you can see here from this drawing, the Syrinx is right down in the chest at the bottom of the esophagus. And it's located at the base of the trachea, as you can see here in the picture, and it's surrounded by musculature, which the bird uses to press on it and make the sound that we all know. Birds that don't have a Syrinx, such as vultures, they can only hiss and grunt, and that's their audio ways of communicating. And so the birds that you hear that actually have a song have this arrangement, and the loons is obviously extreme. It has one of the most loudly heard calls of any bird. 61. The hoot. The hoot is used when two loons are close together. It's just a means of communicating. 63, the wail. Here's an example of the wail. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this. And it's basically used by the birds to say to its mate, "Where are you?" '64, the tremolo. The tremolo indicates high stress. If you hear the tremolo, stay away from the bird. It also indicates permission to land. If a bird is flying by and would like to land, they will call like this, and the notion is that they are asking permission to any loons below whether they can land. And finally, the yodel. Only males yodel. And it is an announcement of territory. 66. Now, how big is a loon? These are actually quite large birds. Their weight can be anywhere from 6 to 13 pounds. Their wingspan, 40 to 50 inches, and their length up to 3 feet. So taking this all together, you can see that they can be quite large. 67. Real-time flight. Their huge size doesn't help them really in terms of taking off. These are very clumsy birds on land, but they're in the water, and often if they take flight, they need to take it from being in the water, which is no small feat. And what they basically do is run along top of the water for a stretch. Here we go. You can see this in this film clip, right on top of the water until finally enough momentum and catching a wind current hopefully allows the bird to ascend. 68. How fast can a loon fly? Well, here are some competing examples. You can see the sparrows can fly 20 miles per hour. A hummingbird can fly 47 miles an hour. A duck almost 60 miles an hour. And a cheetah can run 70 miles an hour. How fast can a loon fly? Wow, 90 miles an hour. Up to. They have been tracked at 90 miles an hour. 69. In fact, how fast does a speeding bullet go? Brings me in mind 900 miles per hour. 70. Let me see. So what eats the loons? We've talked about what the loon eats, but what are the loon predators? Well, frankly, in the water, they don't have many predators. They're at the top of the food chain when they're in the water. What predators there are these gulls. Oh, these gulls, not those gulls. Raccoons, skunks, snapping turtles, and minks. They're all predators, but they are actually egg predators. So what they're really after is not the bird with its very strong beak, but their eggs left alone on a nest. Who's the most dangerous to the loons? 71. We are, because we take up their habitat. Their habitat, which they need for nesting. Here's an example in this picture. More and more is being developed away. People everywhere. 72. Fun. All kinds of fun. But you have to ask yourself, who's this fun for? It is not fun for the loons. And this is the kind of stirring up that you could hear from getting too close. 72. Still. 73. One thing that does threaten the loons, and that's lead poisoning. Take a look at this picture. Now, there are some lead fishing sinkers in this picture. Can you see them? Very hard to identify, but they're there. So this example shows you that actually they're hard to see and the loons can't see them anymore. Loons use stones to help them with their digestion. So they are taking up these things, and sometimes they do wind up swallowing lead sinkers, which is basically leads to death. 74. The solution is for all of us to be using stainless steel fishing gear and tackle rather than the old-fashioned lead kind that are so dangerous to the creatures. 75. But what is the biggest threat to the loons? Humans, due to development and shrinking habitat and intruding, lead poisoning through sinkers and other such accoutrements, and the water quality, in other words, mercury poisoning, which comes out of polluted air. The other predators for loons are turtles, gulls, raccoons, eagles, skunks, minks. They're natural competitors, which are taken into account, but all of the threats that humans bring are really hard for the birds to cope with. $76. What can you do? We all want to help the loons. So if you come across them, respect their privacy, understand the distress calls. You certainly use alternative sinkers, participate in mercury recycling, be a good doobie, and spread the word that these are all very important things for us to do to help. If you come across a dead 77, slide 77, if you come across a loon that is dead, try not to pick it up or to move it unless it's absolutely necessary, and call the Maine Audubon for advice on who to go to next and what to do exactly, and they're happy to help you figure out what to do. $78. So let's love Lovell's loons. $79. The end.